We've been at this war for 40 years. We've spent $1 trillion on it, much needed dollars in other ways. We've had 45 million drug arrests. What do we have to show for it?
America's public enemy number one is drug abuse.
What will you do when someone offers you drugs?
Hi, I'm Matt Welch for Reason TV, and I'm joined today by the acclaimed documentary filmmaker Eugene Jarecki, who is behind the brand new The House I Live In, a great drug war documentary that is just come out nationwide, or is coming out nationwide. Thank you very much for joining us today, Eugene. So you've done documentaries on the military-industrial complex, on Henry Kissinger, on Ronald Reagan. Why did you choose to do the drug war as a documentary?
It's a matter of justice and a matter of common sense public policy. We have a tragically misguided approach to drugs in this country, as people across the spectrum, I think, deep down know. I went to 25 states to talk to people at all levels, in law enforcement and corrections, jailers, wardens, cops, judges, senators. I almost couldn't find to a person someone who would defend the horrendous track record and contemporary workings of the drug war. So suddenly I found on my hands, I like to make very measured, balanced movies that explore something and let us all be the judge. But when you hear from a judge that the drug war has tied his hands, when cops tell you from the front seat of their patrol car that they arrest the same people day in, day out, week after week, without any progress for the community, when you hear from corrections that the system just keeps making more and more bodies that fill their facilities, the tragedy is so widespread and it's so felt by the people within it that it made it very hard to get out on the road and make the sort of measured film that I typically like to make. This is a film that says, this is an American crisis.
On that note, let's look at the film, a clip of Mike Carpenter, an Oklahoma prison guard.
I am very much a law and order kind of guy. I would rather have 10 police cars than one soup kitchen, if you give me the choice. But sometimes I think that we need to be smarter about what those police officers are actually out there doing.
Maybe because he seemed the epitome of a hardened prison official, Mike Carpenter's perspective on the severity of drug laws caught me off guard.
I think a long time ago, we made drugs into this huge thing, and we've made it so illegal, and we've made it such a national issue with that tough on crime stance. I mean, you can't get elected if you don't profess to be tough on crime.
First, we have to join together to ensure that drug dealers are punished swiftly, surely, and severely.
You can't stay elected if you don't do things to be tough on crime.
It's to toughen sentences, beef up law enforcement, and build new prison space for 24,000 inmates.
You know, nobody can afford to be the first guy to say, wait a minute, we can't afford what we're doing, let's do something different. Because if you even made a noise like you were going to be soft on crime in any way, you would be out of a job.
You will be put away, and put away for good. 3 strikes, and you are out.
Was he a character, and were there other characters who you thought going in, all right, I finally got a drug warrior,
yes,
and then they surprised you and turned out not to be?
Perfect question. When I first saw Mike from 100 yards, this guy is the picture book imagining I had of a tough on crime, knuckle dragging, lock him up and throw away the key kind of guy. So I remember sitting down with him thinking, I finally have my bad guy. And within 5 minutes, you discover he doesn't agree with the system. He's got, not only does he have deep reservations about it, he's incredibly eloquent with those reservations in a way few people can be.
The movie, it talks about political and structural things, but it's not a headline political movie. It's not about, it's certainly not about Barack Obama. He shows up a little bit at the end, I think in an ambiguous kind of way. Why did you choose, I mean, this is coming out a month before the election. We have legalization on the ballots in 3 states. Obama has had a very mixed record as a drug warrior, in some ways worse than George W. Bush. Why did you choose not to use the word legalization in the movie and talk about kind of headline politics?
Because I tend not to make films that are designed to attack people. I think that's a political distraction. I actually think it's politically impotent. If you want long-term change with a long vision, you have to make a film with a long vision. And to be preoccupied with one politician or another in the present, when you're really looking at something that's been with us for decades, you're going to confuse the public into thinking they can vote this way and it'll solve. It's those Democrats or those Republicans who are the evildoers or whatever else. It's the whole system at this point. This is an evil that's been mixed in with our drinking water. We bought into this in a wholesale way so that we have become the world's largest jailer with 2.3 million people behind bars. We've been at this war for 40 years. We've spent $1 trillion on it, much needed dollars in other ways. We've had 45 million drug arrests. What do we have to show for it? Drugs are purer, more available, cheaper today, and more in use by younger and younger people than ever before. It's a failure on every level. And so the good news is that's an opportunity. It's an opportunity finally to say enough is enough and to get people across the spectrum, whether it's Brad Pitt, Grover Norquist, Jay-Z, and on and on. You have a brand new constituency. Even Pat Robertson spoke out against the drug war.
One of the strongest kind of takeaways from the movie comes from the analysis that a lot of the history of drug prohibition is inextricably linked to the history of racial hatred or fear, intolerance. On that topic, let's cut to another clip from the film.
While following the steps that so many Americans take through the world of the drug war, I couldn't help but notice that at every stage, Black Americans were disproportionately represented.
You know, in any war, you've got to have an enemy. And when you think about the impact, particularly on poor people of color, there are more African Americans under correctional control today in prison or jail, on probation or parole, than were enslaved in 1850, a decade before the Civil War began. And that's something we haven't been willing to look in the mirror and ask ourselves, what's really going on?
Was this a surprise? Is this one of the bigger surprises that you encountered in making it? Is that one of the things that you sort of learned in the process?
Sure. I mean, growing up after the civil rights movement in America in the 1970s, I had a lot of friendships in the Black community for a lot of reasons having to do with how Jews like my family fled Europe and came to America and sort of saw in the Black struggle a sister struggle to the struggle of Jews in Europe. I understood growing up that there was a racial issue, and it increasingly took sort of root in my perception of the drug war. The idea that we had had racist drug laws before, that was brand new. When I started to make the film and came into contact with experts on the subject who said, you know, I mean, the first drug laws we had were in the 1800s against Chinese people, where we had opium laws. They were really just thinly veiled laws about racial control to keep the Chinese immigrant population in California in check. And these laws have always been kind of random and selective. You know, the #1 user of opium at that time in America was a middle-aged white woman, all across the country, largely in the South. And yet we didn't make opium illegal across the country. We only made it illegal in California. Right. And we didn't even make taking opium illegal in California. We only made smoking opium illegal in California. How convenient that that was the way the Chinese used it. They smoked it. So we made smoking opium illegal in California, specifically where they were immigrating to.
How does the drug war end?
I think the drug war ends in this country, and I am optimistic about it, because the public voice rises and rises until it really outweighs the ever more hollow rhetoric coming out of the political class and the corporate class, who are really just clinging to this thing because it's profitable to themselves. But it's not in the interest of the public. It's not good for America. It's weakening us. It compromises us in the eyes of the world. It erodes our labor force. It damages our inner cities. It compromises public safety because police are focused on the wrong things. We waste tens of billions a year that we can't afford. And so I think it changes because common sense prevails through the voice of the public and makes it increasingly uncomfortable for politicians to play the same old tough-on-crime games that they've played for decades.
Eugene Jarecki, thank you very much. The movie is The House I Live In. For Reason TV, I am Matt Welch.